Hey y'all, Brandon Hewitt here with BRandom Fishing, and we are going to clean a crappie today. It's not a monster, but it's still 12 inches long, so we should be able to get some pretty good fillets out of it. So when I'm cleaning crappie, you want to go right here behind the gill plate. You'll see his gills, and then there's a gill plate right here. You can hear it. Right behind the gill plate right there is where you want to start. Lift up his fin, and then take my knife, and you don't want to cut into the scales, but when you come at an angle through the scales, you see how they lift up like that? That makes it way easier to cut through. And then you're just cutting through the skin. You don't have to fight the scales. And I cut through like so. And then you take your knife and you follow that backbone right down its back. Right close to the center line. You just follow it down. You'll feel it hit the backbone. You see that how it stops? You just push a little pressure backwards and just keep following that rib cage and that backbone all the way down. And then right about where his midsection is right here, you'll feel that knife go through and stop hitting the backbone, and then you can push that knife all the way through. And then the backbone is still there in the middle. You just take your knife at an angle and then just cut through following that backbone. Just like that, all the way through. And crappie have such beautiful white meat. They're so good to eat. And we're going to take and just start filleting like this. You lift up this meat with your thumb, and then you just, when you're filleting, you run your knife down, and then you feel that rib cage. Once you start feeling that rib cage, you hear it, then you start coming up at an angle, and then you follow that rib cage right across the meat. Cut through the pin bones, because the pin bones are going to be right there in the middle of the fish. And then it'll allow you to follow that rib cage and just keep going and keep going. And then you can get that whole fillet all the way down. Follow that rib cage all the way down. Just like that. And then you just cut that. You cut through, and then see here you cut through like this. And it's easier if you cut through the back side so you don't have to fight the scales. So let's cut through the back side like this. And there's our fillet. Beautiful crappie fillet. Look at that white meat. Oh, it's so good. And then here, all of his guts and everything just stay right intact, right under this rib cage, so you don't even make a mess. On this side, we're going to use the electric fillet knife, and we're going to try not to mutilate this fish. But also on these panfish, and you can do bluegills this same way. So we're going to come through right behind that gill plate, just like we did before. And I didn't mention this before, but right here by his head, there's a lot of meat. So you don't want to cut straight across. You want to come at an angle. That way you can pick up some of this meat that's here by his head. So you come in at an angle, and on this electric fillet knife, we're going to just cut all the way through, like that. And then we're going to turn our knife like this. We're just going to cut through the rib cage. We're going to cut through everything. And we're just going to lift that up like that. Still following the backbone, but we're going to cut through the rib cage. And then we just follow that tailbone, that backbone. And just like that. That can save a lot of time because you don't have to like cut open and then follow the rib cage, and you're left with a perfect fillet. But now, when we take the skin off, we're going to have to come back and fillet the ribs off. Where this one, we did that step already. So the first way that I filleted this, that's the way that I prefer, but these are definitely two good ways that you can clean pretty much any panfish, perch, crappie, bluegills, any kind of sunfish. And this was a female. She was full of eggs. Now that we have the fillet off, now we're just going to take the skin off of the fillet. So I just take my fingernails and dig it into the skin right here by the tail, and then start your knife. And as you're running it down the fish, it's easier if you bring it towards the side. That way your knife can clear the side of the table. Alright, so we're going to take and push our fingernails into the skin, and then we're just going to fillet the fish. So this part takes a lot of practice. You want to, if you do too much of an angle, you'll cut through the skin. If you do too little of an angle, you're going to leave a lot of meat by the skin. So you want to look at the knife, and you can kind of see the angle of where it's sharpened, and that's about the angle that you're going to hold it at. So probably, I don't know what that is, about 30 degrees or so. And you're just going to hold it at that angle, and then just gently push and slide the knife back and forth. As you're sliding and pushing up that skin, you're removing just the skin from the meat, and you're left with a beautiful fillet. That is going to be so tasty. Now this is the fillet that we have the rib cage. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take the meat off of the skin, but then once we take the meat off of the skin, we're going to have to come back through and take the rib cage off of the meat. Alright, so now we took the skin off of the meat. Now we got to come back through and fillet the rib cage off of the meat. And right here in the middle of the rib cage, there's what's called pin bones. And this is what makes it tricky. You got to cut through the pin bones without cutting through the ribs. And this is why it's easier for me to do it while it's still on the fish. And come on, there we go. And then we're just going to see all this rib cage here. We're going to come through this back side, just like that. So we remove the rib cage after we remove the skin, and this is what this fillet looks like. So let me bring that other one back and we'll compare the two. So here you got that flap of skin right here, this flap of meat, and then this one you have that same flap of meat. So the end result is about the same. We might have saved a little bit more meat on the one where we removed the rib cage last, but barely. Like, it was a little bit harder. So it's really personal preference and what you guys get comfortable with. I just have more experience doing it the first way, removing the rib cage while it's still on the fish. Hey y'all, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. This one was a good one to teach because you can clean any kind of panfish this way. Bluegills, perch, crappie, they're all the same. It's two good techniques to use. We saw at the end that they were both about the same. You get about the same amount of meat either way. Either way, you don't waste much meat. That's a pretty good fillet right there. And panfish, it doesn't matter how big or small they are amazing to eat. So even those little tiny panfish, you might be cleaning them all day, but those little bite-sized morsels are so good. It's like the best white meat, just so tasty. I can't wait. And tomorrow's Friday, so we're going to definitely be eating some fish. Thanks again for watching, and remember to fish, learn, repeat. We'll catch you on the next one.